Back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate, and we're looking at the fallout from the first round of France's legislative elections. Last month it was the presidential elections. This, I guess you could say, round 3 of 4, since next Sunday will be the runoff in those legislative elections, ones that are tilting the country towards the left after having the right being in power for 5 years in the National Assembly. With us to talk about it is Senator Richard Jung of the Socialists, Senator Fabienne Keller of the UMP, Ulrike Koldermann, a German journalist and author, and Peter Gumbel of the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Welcome back to all of you. Just before the break, Fabienne Keller explaining how one of a junior minister inside of Nicolas Sarkozy's last cabinet had taken what you said was a personal position regarding whether or not to stand down in case of a runoff. Just to remind us again, because it's a bit fuzzy, the rule when the rule when it comes to the to runoffs, who's allowed to stay? Because how do you get a three-way runoff in the second round? How does that work exactly?
Everybody who has more than 12.5%, not of the voters, but of the people listed, allowed to vote. And in all the cases, the two first.
Right.
Because sometimes when you have
too
many...
So the top two, and in certain cases, 3, and even sometimes even 4. That's
seldom.
Seldom. Okay.
No.
Peter Gumbel, again, your thoughts on in the UK they have the first past the post system, which is, I guess, even more ruthless. But your thoughts when we're talking about how do you handle the National Front in the case of a 2-round system? What is the best strategy in this instance?
Well, I think one of the most interesting stories that we're going to be following in the next few months and years is going to be the heart and soul of the French right, because in the presidential election campaign we saw the former president Nicolas Sarkozy veering quite sharply to the right on some issues, particularly immigration, and that caused a lot of concern among some parts of the UMP, of his party. And what we're seeing now is continuing fallout from that, because I think the right in France hasn't yet figured out how to position itself on issues like immigration. The danger is, for the sort of the moderates who don't like that anti-immigrant line, is that they get too close to the Front National. At the same time, the Front National is tapping into some very deeply held feelings. And so there's a temptation among some parts of the right to go that much further towards the Front National. And this battle, we're seeing it with Nadine Morano and others who are saying, we'll go more to the Front National position. They're still beyond the pale, which is interesting. But I think what we're going to see is a growing debate on the right. How do you deal with immigration, and what is the right position to take as a party? And I don't think that there's a consensus around that yet. It'll be interesting to see how that shapes up.
Now, another 3-way race that might not go to script this time around. 2007 presidential candidate Ségolène Royal, who'd been eyeing the post of Speaker of Parliament, has been forced into a runoff to confront a dissident socialist this time. He's called her a carpetbagger.
Being the frontrunners, I offer my hand to all those now wishing to join ranks with the Socialist Party to give us the best chance of winning on Sunday.
They will have to elect a socialist MP, that's for sure. But they will have to choose, on the one hand, a candidate who's not from here and whose only ambition is to be president of the National Assembly, or, on the other hand, a candidate like me, with a connection to the locality and who is aiming to gather all the voters behind him for the second round.
This is kind of an embarrassing situation, isn't it? We're talking about Ségolène Royal, 2007 presidential election candidate, who's also the mother of François Hollande's 4 children, a well-known figure even beyond France's borders, and who might not get elected.
Yes, well, there is, unfortunately, this candidate, which is dissident, which has been excluded of the Socialist Party, and he is a local man from La Rochelle, and he had conceived that he would be the candidate, and he does not accept that Ségolène Royal
Does this raise
comes.
the wider issue of what they call in English carpetbagging? That is, candidates who aren't from a district who then go to that district.
We call it parachuting.
Parachuting is it's called in French. But it seems as though the French they have a lot of candidates who are not from the original region.
Less and less. Still some, and still too many, in my view. But for Ségolène Royal, I can say this because I did not support Ségolène Royal in her previous round for the presidential election.
In the primaries.
Yes, but I think she has been very loyal during all the present presidential election. She has done exactly what had to be done. So I think she's been doing good work. And it is not quite true to say she's a carpetbagger, because she is president of the region and she was an MP for the next constituency. So she is a neighbor. And I regret this. I think it is not good.
Ulrike Kollermann, your thoughts on this?
I think it doesn't look good for the socialist because she's well known, and if there's another left candidate, they should probably be a bit more reasonable. But on the other hand, it's a democracy after all, and if people vote for the other guy, so let them do it.
All right. Of course, there's the issue, of course, now of what's going to happen. Of course, when the next government's elected, we're wondering whether the socialists can win alone or win with a coalition. But it is pretty clear, according to the polls, that they will be winning, and there'll be no grace period from the markets. Just ask the leader of neighboring Spain. Now, over the weekend, he celebrated when that country got a 100 billion euro bailout from Brussels.
Yesterday, we ensured the future of the euro. Yesterday, we ensured the strength of our financial sector. And yesterday, we ensured what is most important to us, the possibility to grow our economy and create jobs.
All right, he may be eating those words, Mariano Rajoy, now, because Madrid's stock market, which opened up nearly 6% Monday, finished the day down 0.5%. The Fitch ratings agency downgrading Spain's two largest international banks. And it really is, Peter Gumbel, there'll be no grace period either way. It seems to all be accelerating the market's run on Europe, almost, it seems.
Well, and then next weekend, we've not only got the second round of the French elections, we've got the Greek elections, which may or may not signal some big turning point. We'll have to see what happens there. But I think this is really the importance of these legislative elections, because the situation, the international context for François Hollande is extremely dangerous. The French economy is really struggling. We've just had the latest statistics out from the Bank of France showing that France is heading into negative territory. Unemployment's rising. So the situation is very perilous, and we know that there is a big hole in the budget which needs to be filled. So if he has a majority in the parliament, then he's going to be able to put into place the policies that he feels he needs to. If he has to do a coalition, then it becomes it'll be less easy. He's not going to have to do a coalition, it looks like, with the extreme left. But even so, a coalition of any sort is going to be very complicated in a very difficult period. So in some ways, having a clear outcome of these elections is going to make it easier for him. Whether he's got the right solutions is another matter, but it's going to be easier to govern, certainly.
Fabienne Quérin?
The situation is very difficult, and the wake up on the 18th of June, which is a very important date in France because it's the date of the appeal of the Général de Gaulle in 1940, will be very tough because of Greece, because of Spain, because of the budget hole we have. We have to make more budget economies, and the program is full of new spending, 20 billion euros, and we don't have the first euro to pay that. There is the international situation concerning peace, Afghanistan, Syria. We have also the question of the future of Europe. The Germans ready to help Euro, but if we accept to have some control of our budgetary deficit and our economic situation by Europe. So is France ready to do that? That was not in Mr. Hollande's program, but that's the reality we have to face. We were like on our cloud, somewhere else during all these campaigns.
But getting back to the point, Richard Jung, that Peter was mentioning, the socialists, if they don't have that outright majority, is that going to sort of cut a bit the momentum of that François Hollande needs when he goes to negotiate with Angela Merkel, with everybody else in Brussels? that momentum that says, hey, I've got a strong wind in my sails?
Well, either the socialists have a majority by themselves. We can hope this, but it is not absolutely sure. But I do think we will have a majority with some of our allies, like the ones I mentioned previously, like the radicaux, de gauche, the left, radicals, centre-right, and with the Mouvement des Citoyens from Chevènement. Otherwise, we need to have an agreement, further agreement with the Greens, but we already have a government agreement with the Greens. We have a constituency agreement, and we have a government
and they have
agreement.
cabinet posts.
And they have cabinet posts. So I think that in all issues, possible issues, I think things will turn out. Now, the real problem is, do we have the momentum to convince other countries inside Europe to follow the policy which is the one we have defended during the presidential election, and that is to put a little growth in the whole system. We are seeing with Greece, we are seeing with Spain, that these countries are heading down because they have no growth.
May I make a point? 3 weeks ago, there was the first meeting of the European Parliament in Strasbourg, the first plenary session after the election of Mr. Hollande and the creation of the new government. Nobody from the new French government was there to get in contact, not with the French members of the European Parliament, but with all the other member states representing their country. This was a sign taken very negatively. They had a discussion about growth, which was discussed in France. They were sure that the French people would come and get in contact with them. It's analyzed severely in Europe because Mr. Fabius and Mr. Cazeneuve voted against the referendum a few years ago, as you know. So the signs are very bad for Europe today, and it's very urgent if you want to push socialist ideas in the European discussions. You have to respect this very complex system where we are 27
to
member
explain
states.
that François Hollande is not European prone.
He's not. He's not given the ministers who are representing
He is a son of Jacques Delors.
Ulrike Kollerman, a spiritual son, let's point that out. Ulrike Kollerman, you heard there Fabienne Querer talk about what will happen on June 18th, which is a week from today when the dust has settled. What will be more important for the French at that point? The results of the second round in France or the results in Greece?
Probably the results in Greece, because the international scene is very exciting right now and there are big problems ahead. I mean, the French parliamentary elections are very Franco-French, and Angela Merkel and all the others are just waiting for François Hollande to get over it and start to make real policy, because so far he is still trying not to offend anyone, and he had a very smooth start, but things are getting much tougher because there are big problems ahead, and he needs to discuss with the other European leaders. Talking about alliances.
You get the sense that even though he was elected a month ago, that the real François Hollande, we won't know him until after the second round of the French legislative
He was
elections.
never very precise so far. I mean, he made a lot of promises, and the first measurements he took, they were great. I mean, everyone loved that the 30% pay cut for the ministers, that's easy. Or we stop at traffic lights now, great, but it doesn't cost you anything. And then some people are allowed to retire at 60, great, but it costs €1 billion. And how does he want to explain it to maybe, let's say, German workers who have to work until 67 and they are expected to pay for others? So that are the real issues that will come up after the 18th of June.
Peter Gumbel, on this issue, do you think, again, we talked earlier about market time being faster than political time. I know that now in France, among the reforms they're discussing, is to have those legislative elections the same day as the presidential vote. You think that's a good idea?
Well, I think you either have to do it on the same day or you do it several months later. But doing it 1 month later, it doesn't seem to work very well in the sense that as I said earlier, if you voted for your president, on the left, you're not going to suddenly turn around and say, "Oh, I made a big mistake," a month later and vote on the other side for the parliament. Having it on the same day, though, would be very heavy going, because then you would have a sort of a meeting of the personality of the president and the political orientation of the party, which doesn't necessarily follow. I mean, you might hate the candidate of president, but really like the party's ideas, and so you'll vote against one and for the other. That doesn't sound very right. So I think there's obviously a discussion going on about the timing, and it makes sense to have a discussion. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to have 1 month later to have the parliamentary elections.
Do you agree, Fabienne Keller?
Well, this was a decision of Mr. Jospin, if I remember well, of the Socialist Party, because of the cohabitation.
When you had
when the president
yes.
not being of the same majority as the
to avoid
National Assembly, to
conflicts.
avoid that situation. So it's a socialist decision. As we see it working, I think that doesn't help the president to be, far enough, high enough concerning international affairs, big interests, important interests, strategic questions for the country. So it doesn't appear to be very efficient. But, this is French experience, and we have different experiences in Europe in terms of democracy. No system is perfect. But clearly, the French did not want cohabitation again. We had about 10 years ago.
It was too confusing having the president from one party and the government from another.
Yeah, and at the European level, having two representatives not agreeing on the main ideas.
Yeah.
Final word on this, Richard Young?
Yes, well, of course, there is a debate to be carried. We would have to change the constitution. Personally, I think it would be better to go towards a more presidential system. And presidential means a strong parliament. You see it in the US, where the Congress has very strong powers. And I think we should have the general election completely separate and with much more momentum.
All right,
And
we'll go back
and
to the
hopefully
script.
with more voters.
Hopefully with more voters. We'll go back to the script, and we'll have time to do it in our news bulletins as well between now and next Sunday. I want to thank you, Richard Young. I want to thank Ulrike Kolderman, Peter Gumbel, and Fabienne Keller.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. It's coming up next. It's business. Tom Burgess Watson will be with us.